So I'm very excited about the mix of perspectives we have at this table. Because as you'll hear in a minute, they cover a really interesting range of kind of the innovation process technology market. And we have a practicing lawyer at a firm, local firm that straddles the divide and does lots of interesting tech and innovation work for his firm himself. So to kick things off, instead of butchering your introductions, let's go down the row, but let's keep it a tight 30 seconds, guys. Name, rank, serial number, quick statement about what you do, and we'll jump into some questions. Phil, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, folks. Can you hear well? All right. I'm Phil Rosenthal. I'm the president and co-founder of Fastcase. And this is kind of a fun return to our roots. We started 19 years ago. Recently, you'd hear me always talking about data-driven law and docket analytics and all sorts of big, and a lot of big firm things, AI Sandbox. But we really started with the mission of democratizing the law, helping especially the solo and the small firm, and working with bars. And about 900,000 lawyers now have access to legal research. So our core product is online legal research. And then we are also moving into these other areas like docket analytics. And
what percentage of the legal research market have you guys captured at this point?
It's about 3/4 of all lawyers actually would have Fastcase in one form or another. I wouldn't say that's 3/4 of the revenue. I did not come in a helicopter or something. But we've really tried to make sure folks, the crazy idea that lawyers should be able to afford access to the law, and as part of helping sellers.
So this guy and his co-founder, Ed Walters, cracked the duopoly, the legal research duopoly between Lexis and Westlaw, which is an incredible development. And Josh, actually, you guys have done something equally kind of monumental in this space. So why don't you tell us what you're doing?
I am Joshua Lenon. I use Fastcase. So I'm also the lawyer in residence at Clio. We are a cloud-based practice management platform for law firms. We were designed for solo and small law firms initially, and we now service all the way up into big law, which has been an amazing development for us. Interestingly, our customer base kind of looks like the spread of lawyers throughout the industry, right? So there's 15% of lawyers in big law, and then there's everybody else. With this huge spike down around the solos, and that's our user base as well. We have about 170,000 legal professionals using us in 90 countries around the world, and that's giving us a really unique insight into how lawyers are practicing law and how they're using technology in particular to help practice law.
Perfect. Kelly?
I've already introduced myself.
The only thing I'll add to mine is that in addition to being a co-founder of LAWCLERK, I am still practicing law on a very limited basis. I'm a partner in a 17-lawyer firm in Las Vegas. So I think I get the price for furthest traveled, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Along with my new friend to my left, I can also bring the practicing attorney perspective, especially for those of you out there that are solos or small firm attorneys. I hope to have a bit of that input tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Blaine. I am an attorney at Davison, Eastman, Muñoz, Lederman, and Paone. And we've gone with the counterintuitive approach of adding as many names as possible to our firm name. So we're about a 30 attorney firm, 65 total employees. We kind of straddle like the small, medium-sized market, but I do complex commercial litigation and some transactional work. I kind of take big, complicated problems with multiple parties and try to put a strategy on them and figure out a roadmap to solving them, whether they be in litigation or not. And a big part of the reason why I'm here today is because I am also the chair of our Innovation and Technology Committee, and I spearheaded some pretty substantial technology improvements that we have undergone over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. And it is an always evolving process. So I'm here to give some of the practicing attorney approach to that.
Perfect. So hopefully that demonstrates you guys incredible kind of range of experiences to draw from here. And as a result, I want to encourage all the panelists, please feel free to ask each other questions, challenge each other, argue, fist fight, whatever you want to do. In the audience, I'd love to make this interactive too, particularly for the people that Kristin mentioned were her people, that you guys who are actually kind of solos, smalls, considering this stuff. I'm going to try to reserve a lot of time, but please, by all means, put your hands up if something comes up that you're passionate about. Let's make this as interactive as possible. All right, so To kick things off, let's define, I guess, kind of our personas, the people we're maybe speaking to primarily in this audience. I welcome kind of supplemental formulations, but in my head, I was thinking about two types. One, I was thinking about the kind of the harried solo practitioner who has done a good job of a little bit with business development, carved out a nice little practice for himself, or herself, and needs to find a way to run it more effectively and grow it into a real business. And then the second might be, that the scrappy 2 to 5 lawyer shop that it has a really nice, it might be turning away work, has lots of interesting kind of work going on. It needs to find a way to kind of organize it and scale potentially. And so with those personas in mind, I wanted to kind of get at what are just the basics right out of the gate. What are kind of the key applications or processes or innovations that these personas should be leveraging? So let's start with persona 1. For that scrappy solo who's now kind of growing a practice, what are the kind of if you were the advisor showing up and saying, and he's like, help, I've got this great business, but help. What's step 1 for you? Who wants to jump in and take that first?
I'll take that.
Yeah.
So this will come up a lot in today's panel, so I'll just get out of the way. Clio runs an annual report that we call the Legal Trends Report that is in part based on big data derived from the usage of our software and in part based on surveys that we run on an annual basis to lawyers and, in this last year, consumers of legal services in order to figure out what's really going on in the practice of law. So you'll hear the Legal Trends Report come up probably a couple times tonight. In one of them, we started taking a look at what are the non-billable activities for lawyers. And it turns out most lawyers in solo and small law firms are only billing about 2 hours a day and actually collecting even less than that once you add in write-offs and collection rates and things like that. So what are they doing with the other 6 hours of an 8-hour day? They're spending time on business development. They're spending time on administrative tasks within their law firm. They're spending time on administering their own technology. Weirdly, there was a really strong percentage across all of the bands that spend time on training and CLE and licensing. So they need to take a look at this 6 hours of non-billable time and figure out how to stop doing that and focus on billable work. Get the client what they need with the expertise that they possess and let somebody else handle the rest.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first set of advice.
So of the small lawyers in the room, how many of you guys have a practice management solution? Yeah? What do you guys use? Lee, what do you use?
We use Practice Management.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Any Clio users?
We use Amicus.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, so if we get, for the solos, if we assume we kind of get them on board with kind of a full service practice management solution, which helps with some of that low hanging fruit.
I'm not even talking about that.
No,
I'm just talking about delegating those non-billable tasks.
Yeah.
Now that can be through technology. It could be you hire staff.
Yeah.
It could be a variety of different ways to do that. But
Yeah.
Start focusing on being a lawyer and allow some of the business functions to be handled by somebody else.
All right, so for our practicing lawyers at the end,
Yes.
what do you guys think that is that time?
I'm going to actually say that before you get to that step, you need to figure out for yourself what being a lawyer is to you. And until you kind of have the introspection to answer that question, I think all the tools that you're going to use to develop your practice aren't going to help you out that much. Because I think that Josh brought up a great point in terms of you want to spend more time being a lawyer. But what does that mean? What do you think being a lawyer should be? And there's going to be different answers for each of us in this room if we're lawyers, or even if you're not. What do you do with that spare time when you're trying to actually solve that problem? And then from there, and trying to figure out what it is that you really want to be spending your time doing, it's easier to start delegating out the other non-billable tasks. Because you might be a solo that takes, you do residential real estate, you do wills, trusts, and estates, you do personal injury, you do defense on debt collection, you do all that stuff. But, what is it that really makes you tick? And, I personally think after, going through this for 10 years, I know what makes me tick on it, and I know what I want to delegate out. And you got to have a strategy. But in order to really decide of what that strategy is, you need to really know what you want to do with your time.
I couldn't agree with that more. So once you figure out your best and highest use of your time, the things you want to be spending your time on, because believe it or not, as a really highly educated lawyer, you do have the luxury of deciding how you want to spend your time to a large extent. Once you figure that out, if you want to be in court, then be in court. Delegate the rest. Get someone to answer your phones so you're not spending 2 hours a day with potential clients weeding out the junk on the phones. Hire a service if you have to. There's virtual receptionists on every, all sorts of different types of services you can hire there. If you don't want to go to court, if you're a rainmaker, if you want to spend your time meeting with potential clients, getting to know them, bringing in those new cases, then delegate the court work. Go hire appearance counsel. Maybe explore a contract attorney or a freelance lawyer. But once you figure out those things out, you really need to take the leap. I think one of the things that I hear the most from lawyers, and I've been to a lot of legal conferences in the last year, one of the most common pieces of feedback I get from solos or small firms is that they wish they would have hired sooner. They wish they would have delegated and taken that leap sooner. It's scary at first, but there's a lot of flexible options thanks to technology, and you need to explore those.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? So, and I know in today's service economy, maybe the idea of hiring a person as opposed to a service is kind of silly. But if you are hiring a person, who is your first, in a small firm, who is your first non-legal hire? Like, who are you reaching for first in your experience?
I guess it depends on what a non-legal hire is too, because I think you're still gonna have kind of a Swiss Army knife setup in that situation, regardless, and you're gonna want to know what. I think you're gonna want to understand what the tools are that are out there that are less people intensive, that you can delegate to well-constructed systems, but you're still gonna need people to monitor those systems, right? So. What are the, kind of going into what Josh had said, what are the systems that you're going to be using, and what Kristin had said, what are the systems you're going to be using, and where are people going to interact with them? And then how are you going to oversee that, and what are your primary responsibilities going to be?
Okay.
To me, I'm going to say that a really good paralegal that is not a new paralegal, a seasoned paralegal, can be worth their weight in gold. I love mine fiercely, and she knows it. So if that's your first hire, because they can help a little bit with the phones, although it's not their highest and best use of their time, but a really good paralegal can be a tremendous asset to your business when you're starting out.
There's a lot of like freelance paralegals, and that's an option out there too.
So you guys you're making it. We're going to circle back to one of the points you're talking about finding your best and highest use. There's a bit of a kind of startup product market fitty kind of thing there. We're going to come back to that at some point. But let's pick up on the second persona, and maybe Phil and Kelly, maybe you guys can weigh in here. If let's say you have what you find is the core essential tools in place, at least to kind of run a decently effective practice. You think you know what you want to do. You're getting good results in the market and a fit, and you've decided you do want to kind of grow. You want to scale a bit. What does a very busy 2, 3, 4, 5 lawyer firm need to do to kind of take it up to the next level in your experience, both maybe through a marketing lens, Kelly, and also Phil from a tech perspective? What do you guys think?
Oh gosh, well, of course, then you need to create and define your marketing budget and where you're going to try to get your clients from. And before you can even do any of that, you need to know where you've gotten your clients from in the past, and is that actually the market that you want to be going after? Are you reaching exactly the kind of people you want to be reaching, or are you getting, for every 10 client leads you're getting, is there only one person in there who's a good fit? So can you define your message a little bit more? Can you create content that kind of boils down who it is that you want to be reaching? And once you can figure out and define those sorts of things, then you will figure out your path to grow from there, I guess.
Do you think, is there like a kind of a number one common mistake? People who've never done the marketing exercise before and think they're going to try to do it, do they just run and spend a bunch of money on LinkedIn that's just like flushing it down the toilet? Like what is kind of the number one mistake in your experience?
There are so many mistakes. Apparently somebody in the audience has a mistake. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I find that when it comes to my marketing, it's a lot of, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm trying all these things. I'm writing things. I'm doing stuff, and I don't know if it's getting out there. Do you have any suggestions for keeping on top of that?
Well, how are you tracking things? Is like that's always where you need to start from, is before you even spend a single dollar on your marketing, how are you going to track what the end result is going to be? So you're looking at your, not only your Google Analytics, because people can visit your site, but then if they're turned away, that means nothing. So tracking, sorry, you were going to say something too.
Oh, no, I was just wondering, should we repeat the question for the recording?
Oh, yes.
But that was a purely technical interjection. Sorry. No.
So that's the big place to start. Really doing a lot of research into, for your practice area, what are people searching to find lawyers that are looking for your services. Start from there.
Perfect. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, first I wonder if the two cohorts are inherently different. When I think of the Clio survey, it's not just solos, right? So why is this thriving firm of 4 or 5 too busy to get more work? It could be because it's still spending 48% of its time on administrative work. And so you got the same answer as you got for the solos, that they better fix that. And then to repeat the actual practicing lawyers and what they're saying, but find out what you want to do. All right, you want to grow. Do you want to grow sort of up or down, right? Are you looking for, you're saying, all right, I'm a consumer bankruptcy attorney, and gosh, there's so many folks out there that just can't afford even the relatively modest fees that those folks, how can I automate this more? How can I automate the forms? How can I do work on that kind of process? Because I want to get more matters that'll be smaller and I'll charge less, but I'll get a lot more volume. Or a consumer bankruptcy firm, that can be 5 people, so it'd be the same group. Or is it something where I want to go grab business from larger firms, and then there's, I think, a different set of things that you probably have to do, and so I'm struggling with whether the two cohorts, they sound so different,
right?
Are they actually different in the problems that they face?
No, it's a good point, because the prescriptions might be very different. So sorry, we're going to pick on all the small law lawyers in the room. Those of you who are the small law lawyers, how many of you aspire to be competing for kind of larger matters, bigger matters, want to be up against firms that are like 10 times your size? How many of you are, no? Is it like when you think about scale, is about doing more of the same for the same clientele, is about kind of moving up to larger size clients? Who wants?
I think it's, in my case, we're a employment law firm, and I got a taste for defense work the first time a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Did really well with the case, and they paid hourly a lot. So we kind of want to scale that up. And get more of these. How do we do that?
Yeah. No, fair enough. Because it does. Sorry, did you want to?
Ours is almost different. We like doing what we do. We just want to do it for other people that perhaps are underserved out there. But I think the biggest part with that is you don't know what the market is for your service in other areas at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a fundamental frustration trying to break through to what that is. So more people want what you have. They just don't know that.
Yeah, that's it. So Phil, that kind of sets up a little bit what you were talking about. So in one hand, relying on things like automation, or you can leverage economies of scale essentially with better processes and better technology. Yeah. What is if you're thinking about, so we've got interesting representation here. If you did want to kind of scale up your business, what do you guys think is kind of the critical first step? Might it be kind of leverage that maybe a law clerk or something out there is helping? Is it a marketing strategy? Is it an automation kind of play? How do you guys think about that? I actually want to spend some time thinking about what Phil's talking about here. Does the prescription change based on how big you are, or kind of what your goals are? How do you think about that? Sure.
I think that it's still a matter of what are you going to. I think you need to have a system that has some type of automation to it. But what is it that you're automating? Do you have an inefficient system for 5 cases that works for you even though it's inefficient? And if you want to then grow it to 15 cases and you create a system to grow it to 15 cases, are you going to then be automating your inefficiencies, so you're just amplifying them to make things that much harder for all of your 15 cases, that now you have less time to devote to each of the 15 cases? Or before you even scale it up, I personally think that it makes more sense to think through a step-by-step workflow as to what can I do to make my cases better and handle them more efficiently, so when I get more of them, I'm able to process them more efficiently, and I don't have to spend as much time doing the things that I think I can do better now.
So once you've got those basic systems in place, then I think you also need to be as certain as you can be that you have the expertise to go compete for the bigger cases that you want. Now in Las Vegas, we call those whales. You guys call them whales out here? You want to go for the whales. All right, I love it. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to go for the whale and you've got your systems in place, you are confident in your expertise, then a lot of times you need bodies. And that can be where solos and small firms struggle and where we can come into play. We are a great alternative to solos and small firms that don't want to go hire 10 associates. You don't want to take that on and have that expense, that overhead, that commitment with the uncertainty of how is the caseload going to go, because the practice of law can certainly be a roller coaster, right? You're busy, you're not. You're busy, you're not. If you get the whale, you're going to be busy a lot. But to get to that point, you can leverage freelance lawyers and outsourcing to help staff those cases, get big research projects done, plow through discovery. We have a case in our firm where we have gone through over 3 million pages of documents very quickly thanks to the use of freelance lawyers. And so you can leverage those tools through technology to compete.
Josh, thank you.
There's actually a really accessible book for small law firms that are looking to figure out how to ask these questions and take a look at their processes and really kind of go backwards on what's working for your firm and what's not, and then how to improve it. It's called The Data-Driven Law Firm. It's written by Mary Juetten, Juetten. It's available on Amazon. It's a really quick read, but it's all about how do we ask questions, and then how do we make a plan from those questions as a law firm. And I highly recommend it.
Perfect. So we were tossing around a few emails before this event. And something that kind of came up I kind of wanted to dig into a little bit. Let's start with this. Panelists, what do you think is kind of the competitive advantage of the small law firm and when out there in the market competing for business? What do you identify as the 1 or 2 or 3 kind of key competitive advantages that small law firms have vis-a-vis larger firms?
Agility, relationship building, both of those especially. I mean, the thing that in having spoken to so many different solo and small lawyers about what they're doing specifically for their marketing is just that they can leverage connections with people on a totally different level, and really just kind of, you don't have to fit this specific mold that you do when you're at a larger firm.
Okay.
Flexibility on pricing. When you're at a small firm, you can do a lot of things like flat fees, minimum fees, blended rates, subscriptions. A lot more flexibility when you don't have to run things through an executive committee or get management approval before you go enter into the engagement agreement. And also, I think access. A lot of clients that have worked with Big Law in the past are sometimes drawn to boutiques because they know they're going to have a lot better direct access to the people, the leaders who are working their case, and that can be a game changer.
And I think there's kind of the same coin. There's a nimbleness in relation to deciding when something's not working for you and moving on to something else. You don't really have there. I used to hear people talking about, well, this thing's a barge and it takes so long for us to move this barge. Well, when you're a small firm or a solo, you're not a barge. You're a dinghy, and you can
Speedboat. Let's go speedboat.
The best kind of dinghy.
But you need to get well, all right, that works. Speedboat, the cigarette boat. We can go with that too.
Yeah.
So but you can make changes fast, and it can be you can say, look at this legal research tool. I want to try this. Let's check out Clio. I just found out that I have Fastcase through my local bar association. Why don't I look into using Fastcase rather than spending all the money that I'm spending in my traditional legal research tool? There's a lot of stuff like this, and since you don't have as much of the administrative and political fallout as you can have in a larger law firm, it's so much easier and so much faster to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
there's almost something peer-to-peer, psychological, emotional way. I think for a lot of people, it makes more sense, more comfortable with a solo small firm. You know, if you have the cell phone of the managing partner, right? I mean, it's always about customer service. If it's a firm of three, you know, I don't know who the managing partner, you know, but you have this easily get to any of them. And I think there's something that just, if you're a small company, if you're just a person, that means something at a psychological level.
Yeah, it's interesting, and this resonates. Charlie, what do you got?
Well, question for the panel. Turning the telescope around, you're a legal tech company, and you want to market to solos and small firms. What's the best channel to market to solo and small firms?
Word of mouth, period.
That's you, and other than putting yourself on Clio's platform, but what's another marketing channel through which a startup or a well-established legal tech company can reach the solo and small firms?
Well, yeah, let's pause. Josh, just spend a quick second telling us the story about selling and acquiring customers in the small law community, because Clio has been kind of changed the landscape there dramatically.
When we were founded in 2008, there really weren't good software offerings for solo and small law firms. And a large chunk of that had to do with the distribution model for software, right? You had to buy a whole bunch of seats, like tens of thousands of dollars. You had to set up your own server. And then once a year, a sales rep came by and said, give me tens of thousands of dollars more. And hopefully it's the right fit for your firm. But if not, I'll see you in another year and ask for tens of thousands of dollars. And the internet came along and changed all of that, right? And so now suddenly a solo could weigh a software and try it out for a month. And if they didn't like it, they could move on. And that was really Clio's business model. But they had to find out about it first. And there's all sorts of marketing tricks that happen with Google and Facebook. Tactics. Yes. And now LinkedIn, which I think is a really successful channel for discussing things with lawyers. But Clio's largest customer acquisition channel to date has always been word of mouth. And so once a lawyer discovers you, finds the utility of it, they will turn to their network and talk it up.
What is that network? Is it just their person, peer-to-peer, local?
Well, it depends. So I will tell you that the New York City market is very inward-looking, right? As a whole, New York City does not look outside of New York City for recommendations and reviews. And we know that, and there's a reason I'm sitting in New York City today, even though I live in Vancouver, Canada, because we need to be a part of the conversation to drive awareness. But good customer service leads to really good reviews. A well-functioning product leads to really good reviews.
Where?
Amongst a network. So amongst solo and small law firms, Solo Says, which is a mailing list from the ABA, is still incredibly well-trafficked. Within the greater New York State area, county bar associations are incredibly prevalent in terms of drawing out member participation compared to the New York State Bar Association. So it will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, from practice area to practice area. So if you are an immigration lawyer, you don't care about your state bars. You care about about ALA and what's going on in those conversations there. So, but word of mouth exists in all of those networks, and being able to reach them directly, have conversations with them, and allow them to then carry the conversations forward has always been a very successful strategy for Clio.
Comment, because unlike big law,
Sorry, yeah.
you can do one season, two seasons, you can reach out and talk to managing partners here. With small and solos, it's all over. How do you market to that great number of?
We have an expert.
So what Clio also does really well, they have, and this is a big investment, but these beautifully curated client testimonial videos, reviews on their website, those kinds of things that make meaningful connections with your audience. And this is stuff that if you have the marketing budget to do for your firms, do whatever you can to get those testimonials that are real people. I mean, video, everybody should know, like, video is the thing that you should all be doing, right? Like Instagram stories, Facebook Lives, like all of it. So that's huge. But also then your Google My Business listing, make sure that that's filled out, make sure you're sending people to give you Google reviews. Everywhere that you can get reviews just helps bolster your who you are in the marketplace and lets everybody know it's social proof. Lets them all know that you're doing the good work that you say that you're doing.
Yeah, and that tends to be a secondary source. So Charles, you'll be like, hey, I've used this really great tool to your network, and then they will hop on Google, and they'll be like, oh my God, Capterra has 100 5-star reviews for this software. G2 Crowd has another 50. Here's a bunch of people on YouTube talking about how much they love it, and that all starts to like build weight and add up.
Another thing I found that might speak to your question, but also the solo and small firm attorneys in the audience, is there's a lot of communities in the online world that didn't exist 10 years ago. I mean, there are LinkedIn groups for different practice areas. I'm in an estate planner LinkedIn group. There are Facebook groups for any sort of type of law practice area you can think of. I mean, I could name 10 that I'm in right now that have really interesting discussions about the topics interesting to you. And the Lawyerist is another one that comes to mind, another great community for people trying to grow their practice areas. So research those online communities and don't be afraid to dive in and join them and interact with them. You might find more value there than you expect.
Yeah, I think you have like personal relationships and you have associations of people, and you kind of have to figure out what the target is that's going to make the most sense for you. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach, you know. But I think the important thing is that once that message gets out there through either, you know, word of mouth or a podcast or some association online or in person, you need to make it easy, like Josh was saying. And if you're trying to market your service, don't make it so hard to get through the gate that I'm not going to take the effort to test out what your service is. If I can't test out what your service is in the 20 minutes of interest that I might have, then you've probably lost my interest in your product or service. So the easier that it is to demonstrate for me that your service is going to fit my need, which for me requires me to do some type of like testing or validation or like talk to somebody or something of that nature. The easier that is, the more likely that there's going to be a sticky relationship there, and I'm going to then try to figure out a way to put the next steps in place to continue that and fit it into my model.
Yeah, business model flexibility is key. I mean, innovation is not always in the technology. It can just be in being willing to sell in a different way, doing what your customer wants if they want a certain trial. You know, when we started, just the idea that, and this was long ago now, but the idea that instead of doing a 3-year contract, you could have a month-to-month cancelable subscription. That was never heard of. You know, Weston Lexus still don't exactly do a lot of that. And just saying, all right, customer, you would like, you know, use it for a month, and you're a solo, you need it this month, and you go to cancel and come back 4 months later, and then come back 6 months later, because that's how you don't do research very often. That's what the customer wants. Well, fit the business model of your customer. And the bar associations that Joshua touched on also were a big part of it, and part of the business model innovation that, you know, all right, the bar wanted to also democratize the law and make sure everyone had access. And they said, we'll buy it wholesale for everybody. And suddenly there's a channel, right? And so, you know, the price per person certainly goes down, but it turns out you have this channel where you can do all these other things. And so I think both our companies have done a ton in working with scores of bar associations around the country. And so that's another great channel for the vendors in the room. And it's just a way to get in front of a lot of people quickly, and they have their structures also of people that they trust, and oh, well, this is the legendary leader of this section, and right, and if that person likes you, and you get involved with the section, so they're just different ways for people to know that, oh, this is a trusted company, you know, we can go with that.
Here's an example that I'll give, and Phil and I didn't meet before today, so he wouldn't even know this, but it was probably 5 years ago, and through the New Jersey State Bar Association, I found out through an attorney in my firm that's more affiliated with the Bar Association than I am, that we all have Fastcase licenses. And back then, the traditional legal research platforms didn't have the best mobile applications. And I knew that I was going to be in court, and that rather than bringing a bunch of papers with me or bringing a laptop and saving, Word documents or PDFs locally, I wanted to be able to move on the fly on an iPad. So I downloaded the Fastcase mobile application, and then I managed to, get the cases pulled up, and I used the cases from the mobile application for Fastcase. And that was, that's an example to me of like it's kind of reinforcing the point, because Fastcase spent the time to build a mobile application that was better than its competitors at the time. And it was a tool that it was available to me, but I didn't even know that it was until somebody told me that it was.
And Fastcase is still the most widely downloaded legal application, isn't it? Well, legal tech application.
According to ABA surveys, by some miracle, we are the #1 legal app, and it's made a huge difference because what do students, if you want the next generation, what do students do? They know all the apps. And so if you have a well-rated app, all the students will find you, and we don't have to market to the law students. We still do, but they find their app.
No, I love it. The point about the channel partners and strategic partnerships are key. I mean, so they're being Fastcase are the masters of doing the state bars, right? And then Clio, if you're willing to integrate with Clio,
one state bar right now.
Yeah. The cost of acquiring customers in this diffuse small market is plummeted as a result of that company, which is stitched together this entire market. So it's very cool.
Here's one other thing that I want to say though. Just being in the bar association, like that's still not enough, because there's still a knowledge gap. I don't think it's really a resources gap. It's more of a knowledge gap, because you don't know what you don't know. So, I didn't even know that application was available until an attorney that was more involved in it told me about it. So then I used it. But it had been available to me probably for 2 years, and I didn't even know about it. So it's trying to figure out a way to bridge that knowledge gap as best you can, and there's no perfect way. But, as we strive towards it, we'll probably figure it out a little better.
I want to, was there a question? Lucy, you got a question?
You're talking about bridging the knowledge gap for these techs, these legal techs. In law school, we're given access to Bloomberg, Westlaw, and LexisNexis as students. So
And
we're
Fastcase.
learning. I have not been given any
Most, not all, some don't yet, but we can fix it.
But,
I know a guy.
but if you really want to bridge that knowledge gap, I would say start there. Because, like I said, we don't have Fastcase. But I know, I started using Westlaw when I was an undergrad, when I was getting my paralegal degree. And I know Westlaw backwards and forwards. And it's the one I prefer because I know
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I can use LexisNexis, but I don't like it as much because I haven't used it as long.
let's use that as a point. So Charlie, I'm stealing your metaphor, whatever that is. Let's take the telescope and flip it back around the other way and talk about education. And Chris, I want to pick up something you were talking about a minute ago. You guys on the panel generally have referenced multiple times, like trying to find what you love, trying to find the right things, trying to test things, other things. Traditionally speaking, the pedagogical model at law schools is not teaching certain skill sets. And the skill sets that you guys are describing sound a lot more to me like the business and entrepreneurial type skill sets that I was learning reading The Lean Startup after I left my law firm trying to think about startups, right? So for the small law firms in the world, I gather we think they might need to start treating themselves a little bit more like entrepreneurs and small businesses. How do you cut your teeth there? What's the most effective way to kind of learn that on the fly while you're trying to run a legal practice?
You took my quote.
Oh yeah,
Just
sorry.
From my our emails back and forth.
Totally.
No,
Credit, citation, footnote. Kelly.
yeah. No. The huge difference for small firms in treating themselves like a self-employed person versus a business person who is actually trying to grow something, and it's just a matter of what you're talking about, reading books. Our agency follows the EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System, or Traction business model, and it is so amazing, putting processes in place, getting other people to do work that you're not good at, kinds of things. It just kind of gives you a whole 6-part business model. So that's one. I know this isn't really what you asked for, but that's what I would recommend. Just
100%.
kind of starting from that place of looking at your firm as a business, whether you do want to stay a solo forever, for better, for worse, or whether you do want to grow, you have to allocate different resources. You have to pay yourself appropriately because that goes into the time and the billing things. There are so many small firm lawyers I know who do not pay themselves a salary, and that just kind of sets you up for failure from the start. So.
Anything else? So if you're going to treat your small law firm, your growing law firm that has a million things to think about as a business, what are the KPIs? Like, what are the key performance indicators you think you should be looking at? Josh, you were referencing the survey talking about what time is billable versus not billable.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, one of them, because that helps identify where you're spending your time and is that to your best benefit. I think there are a whole host of KPIs that we could be focusing on. So Clio's Legal Trend Report focuses on 3, which is number of billable hours, number of hours that are then billed to the client, and then collection rates on those billed hours. But you could go far beyond that. And we've started researching lawyers, keeping track of potential clients in their pipeline, keeping track of how often do existing clients refer clients to you, because word of mouth isn't just for legal tech. The majority of legal consumers find a lawyer through word of mouth as well right now. And you should be harnessing that channel to the best of your ability. The current one that we just focused on just last week, and just Tuesday, is Net Promoter Score, which is a really simple way of measuring customer loyalty. And if it literally takes asking your client a single question on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being extremely likely, how likely are you to refer this business to friends or colleagues? And once you gather that information, you're able to then start making decisions on what do your clients like? Do you like those clients who like those things? And should you be targeting them more? So we could talk for hours on KPIs, but if you want to just go with a really simple single one, Net Promoter Score is a great place to start.
Does everyone know what that is in here?
Sorry, yeah, I did a really high level.
How do you get your people to do Net Promoter Scores? One of the issues is that you gotta have them do something basically. Do you have a little carrot basically for them to do, or sort of just make this part of your standard process?
So in terms of people doing Net Promoter, you mean your clients? Yeah. So it's actually a bit of a difficult area for lawyers, right? Because soliciting referrals butts right up against soliciting feedback, ethically speaking, right? And so I think it's part of relationship building with your clients to let them know that you will be asking this and that you will be acting on their feedback is the thing that will drive them to give it. We just built a prototype right now that allows for both anonymous and non-anonymous MPS feedback that we're testing as a service to our customers to see if clients want to be able to give anonymous feedback. We don't even know that right now yet, if that's something that they want. So I think relationships will drive that in the beginning. And then once you create the cycle, and in the Net Promoter system, it's called a closed loop cycle. Once you create a closed loop cycle of they give feedback, you consider the feedback, you act on the feedback, then you give the survey again, they'll participate more and more frequently is what we have seen in other industries.
There's Ask Nicely is a service that you can use until you, of course, have Clio incorporated, that will send out that for you and then get 5 stars, more review-based, but Ask Nicely is a good MPS score service. And then for criminal defense and PI attorneys in the room, if there are any, I just got a demo of Case Status, which is a really cool app that you can use to have documents for your clients. They can track the status of their case, and it asks them for NPS score, I think, up to 8 times throughout the life of the case. So you kind of know how you're doing based on their feedback, and it just sort of, it's a really organic way to get that feedback from them.
One way to go even a little more old school, and what I did when I was building my book of business was never underestimate the value of a handwritten note. And I am bad about it now, but early on, if you sent me a referral, you better bet you got a handwritten note thanking you profusely for that referral. If you were a client at the end of our engagement, you got a note saying how much I enjoyed working with you. And oh, by the way, if you have any friends or family I can help with their estate plans, I would love to talk to them as well. Really old school, super valuable. So get out your pen and your best penmanship and put that to work. I think also when you're early building your book of business, another way to track your progress and to challenge yourself is set a benchmark for, how many networking or marketing type of events do you want to do a week? For me, it was 2 or 3. Otherwise, I was exhausted. But you've got to make yourself get out there so you can stay top of mind. Today, I pretty much track myself by dollars in the door because I could care less about the billable hour. I'm primarily on flat fees, and at the end of the year, at the end of the quarter or whatever, it's all about how many dollars were collected through the door, which is my key.
Can I ask a follow-up question to your networking?
Sure.
With whom did you network?
So for me, my practice is estate planning and probate, despite the fact that all my partners do really high-end, crazy litigation. For me, it was financial planners, and really my number one referral source is other attorneys that didn't do my type of a lot. That's where I get all my business today with zero marketing, is just other attorneys. Writing articles for the Bar Journal, speaking at CLEs, stuff that is very time-consuming and doesn't result in a dollar can generate dollars down the road. So don't be frustrated if you do these things now and see zero result the next week, the next month, the next year. There are people that attended seminars that I did 3 years ago that are now calling me to write their estate plan. So you're planting those seeds.
So I totally agree with that. And I think what has worked for me the most has been, there was a period of time, probably within the first 5 or 6 years of practice, that I realized that I wasn't reading like things that I enjoyed anymore outside of some cases that I was reading, which sometimes you enjoy those, sometimes you don't, depends what mood you're in. But just starting to read things that interested me outside of the law again, or even if it was legal related, but it was not exactly for a case, like that was great for me. Like it just kind of taking your mind and being curious and thinking about other things beside what's right in front of you and getting out of your own body can be helpful. So kind of doing things to keep that curious mindset and reinforcing that, I think, is really helpful. And you can do that a lot of different ways. Reading's one of them. You can do the podcasts. You can do audiobooks. You can do, there's another easy thing to do is just listen to people that you work with, whether they be people that are for working with you in your firm, either an employee or a contractor or a consultant. What are the problems that they're dealing with, and what do they think about? Because they probably are experiencing pretty similar things to what it is that you're experiencing. So what is their perspective on how to better tackle those problems? And your clients as well. I have some friends of here that are clients today, and 5 years ago there was a question that one of them asked me, and is, why don't I have the ability to confidentially send a document to your firm?
Yeah.
And I was like, it's a good question, and I can't answer it. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, but I'm putting a plan in place to try to get that done. And shortly thereafter, there was a plan in place to get it done. And then, just realizing that as you're going through, you kind of can double down on the personal relationship with your clients and make them, more friendly and strengthen them, because getting again outside of your mind and your body, this is a unique situation to the person or the company that's dealing with it. They don't have the perspective that you have. They don't have the experience and the expertise that you have. This is not to them just something, one of maybe 15, 20, 30, 50 cases that you're dealing with. This is their life. So are you explaining things as well as you should be? Are you saying what an interrogatory is, what a request for production is, what a deposition is, what a complaint is, what an answer is? What are the significance of these documents? And why is it important for us to do these things in the time limits prescribed? Just by kind of doubling down on that, realizing, taking yourself out of your lawyer mindset or technologist mindset and putting yourself in the seat of the person whose interests you're supposed to be representing. What can I do to better serve them? And I think by focusing on that, and you can use technological apps to do it. You can do it with phone calls. You can do it with emails. You can do it with in-person communication. just by doing that, you're gonna find that I think your market's gonna grow and you're gonna have stronger relationships.
Excellent. Lee, you had a question in the back? Is it?
It wasn't a question. I was just
Yeah.
I was gonna comment with respect to Net Promoter.
Mhm.
One of the things that we're trying to do is focus more on offboarding and just getting people into the office after their matter is resolved. So as opposed to saying goodbye at the climax of the transaction. Whether
Here's a bill. See you later.
Yes, I mean, or just shaking their hand in the courtroom or after the closing, actually giving them some time to think about the services you provided, having them come back into the office and having a really open, candid conversation about how things went and whether their goals were met and whether there are other goals that they have that weren't met that we can potentially help them with in the future. We're making a really concerted effort to do that in the coming years.
Yeah, I think that's really laudable. As part of our NPS research for law firms, one of the things we found out, though, is most lawyers, like 90% of lawyers that do seek feedback, and that's actually a really small percentage of all lawyers, only do it at the end of a matter. And they don't do it during the matter. And so case status, you said we'll send it how many times?
Up to 8 times.
Yeah, so throughout. So I think what you're doing is really laudable. I would also encourage you to give them some time, even before the close of the matter, to provide some feedback along the way, and you'll find that valuable as well.
That's a great point. Adam?
To answer your question about how do you get NPS, Matt talked about earlier the process, like we're building into the processes and then bring it back to the office. I think that the processes is something that the solo and small law firms are starting to work out. But yeah, to answer your question, quoting Matt, I tweeted you out, Matt. But yeah, processes, building your processes.
Excellent. We got another question? Yeah.
Can I add on, because you mentioned reading the lean startup and you mentioned NPS, so you're using a lot, and you hear a lot of people in design, customer journey folks, so you're hearing a lot of stuff also talking about applied to legal world leverage technology. How much did you feel that actually applied, or in fact, did you have to tweak it a little bit to say it's a little bit of a different piece here, and these are the pertinent things I would take out of that, or maybe these are the mistakes to avoid?
I'm going to kick that to I worked in big law and, cookie cutter type environment. So what do you guys think? How much of the entrepreneurial lessons can you just take, are on all fours for legal practice, or are there idiosyncrasies about legal that require you to kind of tweak the way that you think about it?
Well, the ethical rules are the ethical rules are the biggest idiosyncrasy on just thinking entrepreneurially, right? You can't have the kind of partnership with the tech companies that you would think would just happen here because it violates the ethical rules. A lot of countries are dealing with it, I think, better than we are. I hear panels all the time and like, well, can you even use AI? Because maybe that inherently violates an ethical rule. And so there's so many constraints that we have in the system. I think though I don't know at the end of the day if that changes the way a small firm should think. I think you still have to think entrepreneurial in the same way, and then occasionally say, oh, wait, that's what I want to do if I was an entrepreneur. Now I'm going to have to tweak it a little because of these rules. So I think you think the same way, and then you fix it.
In the same vein, a lot of the business books that you can read can help you better comply with ethics rules too. Like one of the best books I read early in my career, and I don't know the author, but the book is called The Checklist Manifesto. Okay? Amazing book, A Checklist Manifesto. And for my practice area, that's my process, is my checklist. You can ask my paralegal who I love. We have a checklist for every type of case. These are the things we need to make sure we do. It's in the front of the file. We literally check them off. And we reevaluate those lists at least once a year. If there's legislative changes in case law, whatever, update them, and that's your playbook if you really want to go granular. And yeah, there's ways you can automate that with Asana, or there's lots of different tech tools if you want to get the app on your phone. But for me, it's paper and a checklist.
I think a lot of the lessons that you read in these books, if you can distill them to like what is the principle behind the lesson and then apply that principle to what it is you're doing, is going to be more beneficial for you than just taking the cookie cutter approach.
Yeah.
I think, Kelly, you said earlier, find things you can measure. And
Yeah. Find the things that you can measure and
it.
track. And what matters to you? Is it how many leads you get versus how many clients you end up getting? Is it your NPS score that's the important metric? Is it how many reviews that you're getting? I mean, what's important?
And I think one thing that's interesting about legal is we do have the ethical rules. They're both a curse and a blessing, right? We get to promise things to our clients that other industries don't, like attorney-client confidentiality. That's a benefit. Now we have to live up to that standard in order to maintain that on their behalf, but we can offer that, sell that, right? And so clients will come to you knowing what they want, but not knowing how to get it. And so they will look for you like, I want to submit a confidential document. And maybe it's like, I want to do it like Dropbox, but not Dropbox, because that may not work necessarily for your firm's structure, right? And so the onus is then on you as a lawyer to say, that's a great idea, and here's how I will do it and give you all these other benefits at the same time. Right? They want the yes and here's how answer.
And the funny thing is, if you don't put those tools in place, like somebody's going to do it anyway, and they're going to do it in a way you don't want them to. So you might as well give them the tool to get it done right, rather than figuring out a way around that could be bad. Probably will. So.
All right, I want to. So I think it speaks volumes that the content of what you guys have talked about over the course of this hour has been very focused on kind of getting the basics right in a lot of respects. So let's just pause for a quick second right here at the end of the discussion. I'd like to hear from each of you just very briefly. What is kind of the most interesting and kind of the cutting edge stuff in your particular area of expertise, in your bailiwick? What have you looked around and seen a solo or small firm doing that's really pushing the envelope but potentially generating huge returns? I mean, Phil, I know you guys have done, you and I were talking about all kinds of interesting stuff being done with Docket Alarm and other things. I mean, in that space, Kelly, you were talking about video. I know some people trying to do some cool stuff with video. Matt, I assume you guys have built and done and whatever. So I'd like to hear a little bit about the frontier technology. What's pushing the envelope and really interesting and cool that might apply to this audience?
Yeah, I think I can lead off. We think a lot in the future is all about data-driven law, and it's really just starting out, at least answering the simple questions the clients have always asked and everyone assumed we knew, but of course never did, which is, how long does this take? I mean, 3 to 5 years, right? Or, should I settle? Is this reasonable? Is that judge more or less likely? I mean, things that you can answer often by counting in histograms, right? And so that's where so much of it is going. And so there's more software, us and others, Docket Alarm, but a lot of others doing great things to answer that, and we're seeing that at the solo level, large firm level. But I find this whole question of whether some of these new things are going to help narrow the gap. Everyone assumes technology is going to help the solos and narrow the gap. I think the situation is a little more what we call encouraging. Encouraging, discouraging. Because there's also so many more things you can do with data now, and the legal profession's waking up to that. That will lead to a certain natural advantage, and we're working in this large firm space too, to the firms that have big piles of proprietary data. And actually we can tell you what to settle for because we've actually seen 500 settlements like this, and we made the histogram. Right, that's not going to be public anytime soon, and it's going to be harder for the small firm that doesn't just have that base of data. So I think I think that's what's most exciting is the things you can do, the tools you can build with your data, other data, and also the data-driven law. It will help the small firms catch up, and it will widen the gap at the same time, depending on what's being done.
I know, Josh, you guys have a slightly different take on the data question, I think. Right?
So actually, I'm almost in total alignment with Phil, except for the fact that solos are organizing their data right now. They just aren't necessarily knowing that's what they're doing. So when you use a service like Clio, like Practice Panther, like Leah's using in the back, you're actually participating in a network effect. So I can give some examples from Clio that are really different ways that we have tried to improve our lawyers' lives. So for example, when we designed our mobile app, we added a little quick add button because lawyers told us, I want to be able to just hit one button and add everything. We're like, okay, but what do you add the most? And they couldn't tell us. But we could look back historically over the mobile app and say, okay, most people, when they're using their mobile app, actually add calendar entries the most. That's what they use the mobile app for. So we're gonna organize the list of things you can add by the thing you use the most, and we'll put that right by your thumb, versus the thing you use the least, which is all the way up here, and save you that hair's breadth of a second of having to scroll your thumb back and forth to find the thing that you're going to use the most. That's an example of a network effect. And law firms have been organizing themselves for network effects for hundreds of years. But now technology is going to accelerate that even more. And the solos and small law firms are choosing their platforms and choosing to participate, hopefully in a very symbiotic environment, in a way that improves the practice of law, not just for their individual law firm, but for every law firm. And I also want to highlight Phil's co-founder, Ed Walters, gave an absolutely phenomenal talk on leveraging data for legal decision making at last year's Clio Cloud Conference. We put it up on YouTube. It's Data is the New Oil, I think was the title of it. Go watch that. It's so amazing. The really concrete examples he gives on how we can now use data to make decisions that we had to guess after 30 years of experience practicing law. We're like, yeah, we think that judge will probably rule in our favor, as opposed to being now able to say 95% of the time this judge rules in favor of this type of motion. So Data is the New Oil on YouTube. Ed Walters, love it.
Oh, I should throw in, people ask, how do you get education about this? There's a very easy couple days you can do, and it's go to the Clio Cloud Conference. It has so everything about what solos, what small firms need, and what's coming.
Kelly, what's pushing the envelope in marketing?
First, I just have to say my takeaway from all of this is that customer service is really the thread through all of these things. You're using technology to provide better customer service, and it just kind of is this beautiful cycle. So, but as far as what is happening in marketing, Google My Business, maximizing your profile there, posting videos, getting reviews, it's really moving the needle on your search results right now. And then Instagram, I am loving what some lawyers are doing on Instagram. Kimberly Bennett is amazing, the Lean Zone. I have a list if you want to know who to follow to know what you should be doing for your law firm to set yourself apart. And then, of course, mobile responsive website design. If you are annoyed by your own website, fix it immediately.
Kristin, so for you, happy to hear pushing the envelope, but I would also I suspect there's a lot of lawyers who, when they look at their practice, they're like, I wouldn't use an outside hire. I wouldn't get a freelancer, right? And I think we're living kind of a new world when it comes in terms of putting quality people together in targeted ways. So I'd be curious to hear how either what's pushing the envelope or how you convince the skeptical lawyer type.
Sure.
Yeah.
Still working on the skeptics. So, but they're not my focus. My focus are the people that want to do things differently, that don't want the traditional model. And the most interesting stories that we've come across in the last year are the attorneys with really drastically different business models than you've ever heard of. For example, our number one top user is an attorney who lives in Texas, practices in Nevada and Illinois, and it's a completely virtual firm. Has traditionally hired associates, but was frustrated with the drama and the fact that they work for you for 2 years and then they leave and they're your competitor, and oh yeah, they're expensive and you have to pay them even if you aren't busy, and the list goes on and on. And this attorney has flat out told us, I am never hiring another associate again as long as you guys are in business, so you need to stay in business. And he thinks that the freelance model is way better. And what he's done is he has created his own virtual team of freelance lawyers through our LawCLERK Teams feature that allows him to have a team of about 6 or 7 key freelancers that he just goes back to on repeat. And oh yeah, I've got this evidence issue, I'm going to have Sarah handle that, and I've got this brief I want written, and oh, I think Raymond is my best writer. And he just taps them when he needs help and has this completely virtual firm. The last time I talked to him, I was reaching out to say, hey, would you help me with this one thing? And he said, well, I would, but I'm going to the Bahamas for a week. And I was like, you go. I will talk to you when you get back. So you don't have to practice law the way that maybe your father did, or your aunt, or your mentor, like you can figure out the way you want to do it. And there's some really interesting business models out there when you talk to people.
Matt, talk about either what you guys have done, or if there's nothing you want to claim, but you got friends at other firms doing something crazy. Go nuts. Impress us.
Well, I mean, there isn't really much magic to what we've done besides, pay attention and I think put a plan together and implement it in a common sense fashion. And
That's pretty magical.
And while also adjusting to reality, because it's always different from your plan.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I like to say is, the real magic happens in places where strategy and luck interact with personal relationships. And I think that's where a lot of the fun and personal growth and the rewarding experiences happen. So it's been pretty cool for me to see that. And now we're in a phase where we're able to do things like save research time with Ross Intelligence and things like that, which is just really nice to be able to branch out and to have an opportunity where you feel like the foundation's there and you're able to look into things like staffing, or to Clio, or to Fastcase, or for enhanced marketing like with Kelly. And I think just the fact that we're here and like having these conversations, I think is pretty awesome, because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would probably have been a lot more difficult to get a lot of people in a room together like this and to have all of these conversations and sharing these stories about what has worked for us and what hasn't worked for us, because you're going to fail too, and that's okay. And just having these associations, I think that's great, and that there's all these tools out there. If you just want to find something, if you spend enough time looking for it, you're probably going to find an answer to whatever the question is that you have, either through a resource or through a friend or colleague or a friend you don't even know yet.
Perfect. Well, there's some booze left. I think they're going to kick us out of here in about 30 minutes, and I want to make sure I give people in the room time to interact on a one-on-one basis in just an intimate Q&A setting with these guys. So why don't we leave it here, and will you please join me in thanking our panelists for all of their... Thank you guys all for coming. We'll be back with, I think, a demos event in March. Stay tuned to the Meetup listserv. Grab a drink.
Signs up already. Demo.
Yeah? Yeah, there you go. Nice.